Jeffrey is like most modern young men, and so he is a slave to his impulses. Even worse than that, Jeffrey does not have a sexy morning voice like I do right now. Jeffrey's like Pavlov's dog. He's been conditioned through association and habits that whenever he feels horny, he feels like he has to jack off. But is this the correct way to live, Jeffrey? Were you born with the desire to spill your seed by watching other people fornicate? Or has young Jeffrey been manipulated by the evil porn companies and the OnlyFans girls? Adonis sees young Jeffrey struggling with his urges. Jeffrey needs to be taught how to retain his power. And so Adonis takes Jeffrey by the hand. Well, first he makes Jeffrey wash his hands, and then he takes him by the hand and teaches him how to get onto semen retention. One of the greatest challenges that you can go through is mastering your impulses as a young man. Your impulses are kind of like our biological caveman desires that have now been manipulated by the companies around the world. For example, we have a natural impulse, a natural desire to have sex and to spread our seed. But in the modern world, we're not really doing that. We're not trying to get any random girl pregnant. And so evil porn companies have been able to take a man's natural desire and build up like an association between that and their product. So now we have, I think that's safe to say, the majority of young men who have an addiction to porn because that urge, that impulse comes up 5, 10, 20 times a day. And then when they're finally in private, they can go and release to like their favorite website or app or OnlyFans creator. Do you see how that creates a weakness in these men? They have an impulse that is now manipulated by modern day companies, like businesses, and they are just becoming consumers of that business. I'm afraid we're not actually helped by our original caveman desires anymore. The closer you are to that unrestrained version of you, the worse you're going to do in this modern world. So why not consider right now how good your life can be if you build the discipline to master the impulses and these desires and urges that arise inside of you? Because there's real benefits to being on semen retention, and we'll talk about them in a second. There's real benefits to like retaining your power. Even though that sounds silly, it's actually 100% true. But first of all, I just want to talk about the benefit to your character. So when you stop jacking off as much and you've really put in the effort to decrease it to the point that it's so infrequent, you've done something that most human beings, most animals cannot do, which is you felt your natural desire and you chose to rule above it. I think that's the point when you really become like a top tier human being. When you feel the urge to fap, you don't do it. When you feel the urge to cheat on your diet, you don't do it. When you feel the urge to skip the gym, you don't do it. And the thing is, look, these things are kind of small right now. Like, you do realize, like, if you fap right now and you relapse, it's not the biggest deal in the world right now. But think about the version of you, and this might make you sad, but I want to just be honest with you. I want to be real with you here. Think about the version of you that keeps on listening to these impulses. Now let's project forward 5 or 10 years. And let's say you've got a wife that you really care about, but these urges haven't went away. Best case scenario, you're the husband who's locked away in the toilet jacking off. Worst case scenario, you end up cheating on her. Actually, worst case scenario, real worst case scenario, you don't even attract the wife in the first place because you have been like the unsuccessful, unattractive man who is just listening to his monkey impulses. Do you see how the actions that we take today as young men will directly influence the actions that we take in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years? So although some of these things that I talk about don't really seem consequential, like if you've watched my videos before, you've probably thought to yourself, like, this guy's pretty strict when it comes to the advice that I give. I say, okay, no porn. Not like 1 hour is fine, but no porn, no video games, no TV show, movies, whatever. People think that's really strict and they're like, oh, but 1 hour is not going to make a difference. But it's not about the 1 hour today. It's not about just, jacking off today. It's that it makes you the kind of guy who does that every day, and it becomes more consequential in the future. The version of you that jacks off today leads to the version of you that cheats on your wife and gets divorced. The version of the kid who plays video games today leads to the version of him being like fucking like fully in the AI VR world in the future. Like, if you've ever seen that cartoon movie called Wall-E, where the humans have just become like obese, stuck to like the couch, and they're all like floating through space, just like consuming content. That's where the 1 hour of video games a day eventually leads you to. And people will think that's crazy, bro, but this is just the compound effect. This is the butterfly effect. It's like one small thing leads to another. But now let's talk about this in a positive light. You're watching this video right now because you're actually trying, which is why I've got respect for you and for everyone else who's actually watching this. Just take a second here. Isn't it fucking awesome that you're here right now when there was so much more like fun videos you could watch? You could literally be watching porn right now, playing video games right now, but you clicked on this video because you wanted a competitive advantage, which is fucking awesome. Now think about it like this. Let's say you're still kind of struggling with porn and fapping all the time and releasing your semen, but you're making a bit of progress. You're probably doing it a little bit less than you were a few years ago. If we calculated the total volume of nut that was being shot out of you like a year ago to now, it's probably less, unless you're just going through puberty and you've just got like the increase of seminal fluid. But like, you get my point. The total ejaculations has probably went down for you, right? And just like we said, okay, well, one thing leads to another, the compound effect. Well, the version of you that is putting effort in as you are right now is the version of you that 10 years in the future, when you're like a successful man, you're married, you're a good husband, you're a good father, and you've went away on some like business trip where you've done some conference or some speaking event, and one of the people who watched you speak is like quite an attractive businesswoman, and she wants to fucking suck your dick because she's just attracted to you. And it just happens, let's say the circumstances align, that both of you are in the same hotel and her room is like next to yours, so you both end up kind of stumbling there at midnight when like the conference has ended, and she kind of indicates that you should like come over to her place to fuck her and to cheat on your wife. You take one breath, you go into your room and you call your wife and you tell her it was a good conference and you're really happy and you can't wait to come back home tomorrow. The version of you that masters the impulses today is the version of you that doesn't fall into the same pit as so many other men. Like, can you imagine how many men could have become so great if it wasn't for their impulse, which is usually tied to some kind of biological caveman drive, like the need for status, recognition, and sex? Imagine how great some of your favorite athletes could have been if they were able to control this impulse, not party, not try and get the threesomes and the foursomes and the fivesomes when they become like really famous, stop taking drugs or never take the drugs, and they just focused on their craft. It's like the difference between Conor McGregor and Khabib. There's like such a purity to the person who's able to master the impulses, and this is the important point. You will still get the impulses. The good man that you look up to, he still gets the impulses. He still gets, that like sort of agitating feeling when you really want to jack off, you really want to release. The good men who don't cheat on like their wives, the good men who, for example, don't go and take drugs, the good men who are like godly and faithful and just stand-up citizens and leaders, they still get the urge. Imagine like caveman days, like tribe days, and imagine we go out on like a hunt, and let's say it's just me and you, no one else is gonna find out, but let's say that our tribe has been starving for the last like 2 weeks. We've had no food, we haven't hunted anything. Now let's say me and you find like a couple of rabbits and we end up killing them. We could say, you know what, me and you could just eat these and we wouldn't have to tell anyone. We could actually get into that kind of headspace. And here's the thing, I could imagine like the best tribe leaders and even the best leaders of today, they still get that sort of selfish impulse. Do you understand the power of this? The men that you look up to, the man that you want to be, will still get the impulse. Think about that for a second. You will always get the impulse to fuck, to cheat, to jack off, to take drugs, to indulge. You'll always get it. People are always asking me like, how do I stop the urges? What if it's something that we're not actually supposed to stop? Imagine being 40 years old and the same impulse is going to keep coming up. If the same impulse is going to keep coming up, we have to almost become like friends with it. Think about that for a second, right? You've probably thought at some point the impulses, the triggers, the urges kind of go away. And I will be honest, they do actually reduce quite significantly. Like when you are the guy who's jacking off all the time and, scrolling on Instagram, whatever, and then you completely stop that, the urges do actually decrease. But they still absolutely pop up. I remember just yesterday, I was driving home, so I went to the dentist. It was just random, like as the moment I sat on my bike after I finished, I got like the fucking biggest sort of urge and impulse that I've had for ages to jack jack off, and it was like being a teenager again, where I'm like fantasizing about like what kind of porn could I watch, what color of skin should the woman have, you know. I started to get into like a little teenage boy kind of fantasization, and it hit me, and I was like, that's crazy. Like, I used to believe when I was first on NoFap that I would get to a point where these urges would completely go away. What if they don't? What would you do if you were continually going to get urges and impulses like that? You wouldn't try and wish them away. You would learn to deal with them, right? You would learn to sit with them. There's a phrase which is so powerful, and it's kind of related to this, and it's that fear is the sharpest version of yourself. Fear should be something that you are pressed up against every single day. I've read this in a spiritual book about masculinity. The book's called The Way of the Superior Man. And the idea is that we will always be afraid of something. And so we should just get used to that feeling. That's so powerful, right? That's like a separate point, and we can discuss that in like a different video. But think about it for a second. Like, we're always going to have impulses. So we should get used to that. We should get used to the skill of feeling an impulse and just overriding it, ruling over it with like the clear consciousness of the goals and the values that we've decided. So when you retain your semen, you're able to master this like urge inside of you, which makes you a very strong man. Here's the real way that retaining your semen leads to like more power in your life. You're able to put that energy and also practically the time into your productive goals. People always underestimate just how unproductive like being a wanker is, honestly, because I don't believe that there's many guys, especially these days with, you know, the dopamine addiction, especially of the young generation. I don't believe that there's many guys who just kind of power fap and then finish and then move on with their lives. I have a feeling, like maybe this was just my bias, because when I was a teenager, I used to do this. Most guys edge. Like, let me know if I'm right, but I think most guys edge. And what that means is, instead of just like fapping as fast as possible and finishing within like 2 minutes or 5 minutes, you kind of like fap, you feel up the pleasure, you get close to the point of no return, and you kind of like slow down a little bit, then you go again, and then you slow down a little bit, and the whole session goes from what could have been 5 minutes to half an hour, 1 hour, and it becomes often more about watching the porn and the sort of dopamine content that you end up finding, rather than the sort of race to the ejaculation. And so you end up wasting hours every week and also frying your dopamine receptors. So dopamine is kind of like this molecule inside of us that makes us feel motivated to do stuff. Dopamine is like our motivation. Think about that. That's our feeling of motivation. Think about how important that is. The bad thing is that if we get bad, unhealthy, artificial dopamine from something like porn, we get this massive kind of like animalistic hunt, you know, we need to jack off, right? That's huge levels of motivation for obviously the bad habit. But once we finish that bad habit, we get a dip in dopamine below the level it was actually supposed to be at, which means that basically when we finish jacking off and watching porn, we're actually less motivated to do anything else after that. I know that you get that sort of sometimes the post-nut motivation, like, you know, there's the post-nut clarity, but sometimes you get the post-nut guilt, which makes you kind of think, okay, fuck it, you know, I've spent ages, now I'll go to the gym or whatever. But I bet you the days and like the weeks that you are a fapper, you will just simply have less motivation to work hard for the big goals that you said you wanted to grind for, which is huge, right? Like, think about it. How much would you pay to be 25% more motivated through your life for the hard work? That could be worth like $1 million. Like, if you expect to become a multi-millionaire, 5 million, 10 million net worth, maybe even more, that could be worth like $1 million to be 10% more motivated during your life. Never mind for money, but also for fitness and health and everything else. But being the guy who's watching porn and being the guy who's spraying his seed, you actually lose that extra edge of motivation. I'm going to give you a tip here that I wish I got when I was trying to become successful in the first place. Why are there some people who are successful and some people who aren't? I'm going to give you the biggest tip, and you're probably not going to take action on this just yet, but in about 1 to 2 years, you'll think back and be like, oh shit, Hamza knew what he was talking about. The version of you that becomes successful has said no more times than you right now. Becoming successful is about not doing 90% of things that most people are doing. People think, okay, what do you do to become successful? No. It's about what you don't do. It's literally, you stop like all of the time wasting habits. You stop hanging out with the friends that don't feel productive for you. You want to know the brutal truth of this, so you know that this is true. If you want to become super successful and soon, most of the guys who achieve that actually start saying no to their family as well. I think family is so important. It should be like one of our values, but I'm just telling you from observation of myself and other guys who were able to become quite successful in their 20s. They often have to create a bit of a gap between them and their families, them and their friends. friends, sometimes even them in healthy habits like going out for a long walk. It's about saying no to as many things as possible. And think about it, I've just told you a list of things that you could say no to, which are actually kind of healthy for you. So what do you think we're going to say about things that are not healthy for you, like porn, jacking off, and all of the other bad dopamine habits? They gotta go. The version of you become successful has to let go of the boy grip, like the boyish grip he has over his addictions, his porn, his little girly magazine, girl that you follow on TikTok that followed you back or some shit, and you're like, oh, but I can't unfollow her because she'll think it's weird or something. You have to give all of that up if you want to become successful, if you want to become powerful in life. You have to start saying no to as many things as possible. And saying no to something like just spending half an hour jacking off, that's like quite an easy no because you know that it's not right for you. What do you do instead? Well, then you put that effort, that time, the energy into your goals. I'll give you another tip about becoming successful. It's all about dedicating as many of your thoughts as possible to the goal. So becoming successful is difficult because you basically need to think about the goal like all day for it to happen. The reason why is because when you're having a shit, when you're having a shower, that's where you get some ideas that you implement and you end up making 1% better progress. I woke up this morning and the first thing that came into my mind was an idea for my business that actually might be pretty significant. And I wrote it down, texted it to a few people to see their like sort of input on it as well. But imagine if I woke up with the habit of grabbing my phone and having a quick morning wank. I wouldn't have had that same insight because I would have been, thinking about which porn I wanted to watch or whatever urges and impulses I wanted to indulge in. You need to cut out as many things as possible if you want to become successful. It's the raw reality of becoming successful, especially at a young age. So cut out this massive part of your life, which is just driven by the need to ejaculate. And this could even be desire for casual sex as well. So if you've got to the point where you now, maybe it's not so much about porn, but it's about wanting to just have sex with girls. And now you're spending some time on like the dating apps, you're going out cold approaching, you're going to clubs and parties. All of that is just stuff that is absolutely stopping you from the bigger success that you actually really want. And a lot of guys are not ready for this conversation because they think they can have it all. And it's like you have to slap some sense into them and think like, bro, if you could have it all, you'd have it all, but you don't have anything. You don't even have the girls in the first place that you're chasing so hard, but you also feel like a loser. You can't afford even to go travel somewhere. You don't have good money or fitness or anything. Now's maybe not the right time to be pursuing degeneracy, right? If it's like a loving relationship and it's a lot less about the ejaculation, having sex, but more about the love and the relationship, then by all means, that's awesome. Okay, that's like a healthy thing, fine. But for most guys, it's not about that. So you've got to consider right now, if you want to retain your power, to cut this massive part out of your life, just stamp out degeneracy. I'm telling you, it's not valuable. It doesn't make you better. It's not like experience or anything like that. A real loving relationship where then you can have awesome sex as well, that's awesome, fine. But just like hanging out with degen girls, messaging random girls you know are not going to be like your girlfriend, and then spending time on porn and stuff, it's 100% lowering your potential. Don't bullshit yourself to think that it's a productive thing. If you want a healthier alternative to TikTok and Instagram and scrolling on your phone, the top link in the description will take you to my forum page where you can just discuss like discipline and masculinity. Do the hard work, especially when you don't feel like it. Mwah.